Welcome to our short video where we are talking about one of the funds at the Community Foundation that was created through a legacy gift, which is the Kellett Fund. I'm here with Mark Pearce, the Associate Director of Knowledge and Research at the Foundation, and he managed the Kellett Fund for a number of years. So Mark, can you tell us a little bit about the background to the fund?
The Kellett Fund was established through a legacy gift from Douglas and Gwen Kellett. Douglas was a well-known businessman in Newcastle in the 1960s and 1970s, and the family were mine owners with a long history of philanthropic activity. The family bought a lot of former mining land, and some of this was compulsory purchase to build Washington Newtown, which brought a lot of wealth into the family. When Douglas died in 1987, he left his estate to Gwen and thereafter to charity. And when she died, the trustees invited the Community Foundation to set up the Kellett Fund, and that was in 1997. The initial gift was £5 million.
And that remains one of our single biggest gifts. The £5 million was invested into our endowment, which produces an annual income for grant making, and our trustees have a policy of growing the endowment over time to increase the amount available for grants. To share some figures with you on that, the Kellett Fund endowment value today stands at just over £7.9 million, and this generates around £420,000 in income every year. Since the fund was set up, we have awarded just over £8 million in grants, so that's way over the value of the original gift. So Mark, can you explain what the Kellett Fund supports and, given the amount of revenue it generates each year, how we go about managing and administering that?
Douglas Kellett had expressed a wish that his legacy should help older people to enjoy the kind of active retirement that he himself had enjoyed. And when we have a fund this size, knowing that it's going to be generating a good amount of income each year, we need to take a more strategic view of how best to use it. And we did this by bringing together a panel of experts and those with an interest in this cause to help steer the fund and establish its aims and priorities. Initially, we started with a needs analysis from which we got a baseline of what we wanted to do. And from time to time over the years, we've reviewed the operation of the fund. Some changes have been made along the way, but in general, it's stuck to the priorities that were set for it when it was established, funding leisure and learning activities for older people and helping them to take part in all aspects of community life. Some examples of that are the Silver Sneakers programme in rural Northumberland, which offers weekly gym sessions in peaceful and lycra-free environments for those who find gyms either expensive or intimidating. And there's also things like the Chai and Chat sessions run in Sunderland, aimed at older women from the BME community who may find it hard to mix, mainly due to being homemakers and having language barriers. And activities there are designed really to allow for social gathering whilst also getting women's input on how more older women from that community can be encouraged to make new friends and play a more active part in their community. In sheltered accommodation, where residents can miss out on things due to the restrictions on staff time and resources, we also have supported programmes for residents to take part in things like seated exercise or to learn about local history and ancestry, or perhaps even join a walking group.
I also particularly like the Elderberries Project, which is run by Scotswood Natural Community Garden. And we're going to hear now from Leanne, Defty, who runs the project, on what it does and how that funding has been used. Leanne, thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this recording. If we can start by you explaining what Scotswood Natural Community Garden is and what it does.
Absolutely, yeah. So Scotswood Garden is based in the west of Newcastle. It's a wonderful 2.5 acre mix of habitats that are maintained by our hardworking volunteer team. We maintain it for people and wildlife using permaculture principles. We've been operating as a charity since 2012, but work started on planting and landscaping the garden back in 1995. So we're lucky to have all of the trees and everything really mature and bearing lots of fruit for us already. We've got 5 programmes of work for our local community to get involved in. Our youth and play, education and training, volunteering, outreach and community events, and older people's services. So our projects within these 5 programmes are designed to deliver our charity's mission, which is to inspire and promote learning about nature, the environment and sustainable living, whilst having a positive impact on people's health and well-being. So we strongly believe in the benefits being more connected to nature has for our well-being, because we see it firsthand every day. And so we have an experienced and committed staff team who work really hard to make our little corner of green space accessible and inclusive to the whole of our community. So my role within that is to look after our older people's programme and develop our projects based on the need of our local community of people who are aged over 55.
That's great. Thanks, Leanne. I know the garden is the most amazing space. I've been able to visit a few times now. Can you talk now about the project that has been funded by the Kellett Fund over the last few years, which is the Elderberries Project?
Yeah, we're really fortunate in that the Kellett Fund has supported Elderberries since 2016. The first grant that we received was genuinely pivotal for our organisation's work with older people. We were lucky enough to receive around £35,000, which was to be spent over 3 years. It funded my role, as well as some essential adaptations to the garden to make it more accessible, and some specialist tools and equipment. We also had kind of general activity costs in there and travel costs for participants, and that removed a huge barrier to attendance for a lot of people. And then the success and learning from this original project has just enabled our older people's programme to grow. And there's now a small team of staff who are running multiple projects and always looking for ways to develop further. And that is really due to that initial funding from the Kellett Fund. The original project aimed to support older people to regularly volunteer within the main volunteering team, which created opportunities for socialising, learning and contributing their valuable skills. It promoted healthy eating habits through a weekly shared lunch and sharing of produce from the garden. So anything that we grew was available for all of our volunteers to take home. And we also delivered some nature-based workshops to foster some creativity and the learning of new skills, and established an older people's forum to allow us to listen more closely to the voices of this group of people. And because they're now actively engaged in the decision making around the project, but are also involved in decisions which affect the whole garden, they feel like the garden is theirs now, as well as being for the local kids. Kind of in the past, they'd have this mindset that, yeah, that garden's just for the school kids. They have a great time, but it's not for me. So that's really helped with that. The simple programme of delivery also meant that more than 85% of our participants reported improvements to their physical and mental health, and they also gained some new knowledge related to gardening. The exact number was too tricky to figure out, but I think since 2016, the Kellett Fund has allowed us to work with in excess of 150 people, many of whom experience multiple and complex disadvantages due to either living with a disability, poor mental health, they experience poverty, or they have care and responsibilities or chronic illness, and sometimes just because of where they live. There's also been just lots of transformative work that's happened as a result of this project, but there's one success story that I'd really like to tell you about. It really stands out. This gentleman's been part of the Elderberries Project since November 2016, so that's just 1 month after the project started. I'll call him Paul, just for his confidentiality. He was referred to the garden through Ways to Wellness after having a series of mini strokes. His marriage and his family life had broken down, and due to his strokes, he wasn't able to work anymore. He was really anxious and depressed, and he felt like he didn't have a reason to leave his flat. Paul got stuck into everything that we could offer him. He was there as much as we would let him. He volunteered 3 days a week. He helped out at open days. He took part in accredited training that we offered, and all of the nature-based workshops. And because he got so actively involved, it really didn't take long for us to start seeing improvements. But Paul now describes that initial intervention as life-saving. And he says he doesn't know, or he doesn't want to know, what his life would have been like if he hadn't found the garden. He says he'd be lost without the routine and the structure that Elderberries brings to his life. and the support from the friends that he's made. Paul's still volunteering now, and he's an amazing ambassador for our work, who's become an Elderberries community champion, and he plays a vital role in welcoming new people to the garden team. He tells his story much better than I ever could, though, and he's created a digital story called Dirty Fingernails, which can be watched on our social media.
Oh, that just sounds amazing, doesn't it? And such a rewarding project overall. We know the last couple of years have been difficult and very strange during the pandemic for everybody, but can you explain how it affected this project, and the beneficiaries, and any changes that you've had to make?
Sure, the pandemic changed everything. It was a really stressful time for our organisation generally, because we realised pretty quickly that we couldn't just down tools and let our participants get on with it. The Elderberries participants in particular were already vulnerable and facing difficulties before the pandemic. And so if anything, they needed our support more than ever once the pandemic hit. And thankfully, the Community Foundation and the Kellett Fund were incredibly flexible and understanding, and were actually one of the first of our funders to get in touch with us, just to say that it was okay to alter our delivery and our spending in whatever way that we thought was best for supporting our participants. And it was just such a relief, and in consultation with our participants, we created a bit of a menu of support. So people could kind of dip into what they found most useful. So it included phone calls, activity packs delivered, soup deliveries, walks and doorstep visits, shopping drop-offs, food parcels, and of course Zoom meetings. And throughout the lockdowns, our most vulnerable participants never had a period of longer than 3 days without hearing from us. And that was vital, as they were trying to navigate an increasingly digital world, which was alien to them and actually isolating to them, while dealing with things like bereavement, hospital treatment, being admitted to a care home. There was lots of financial difficulty amongst our participants, and of course just anxiety about the virus as well. We were able to offer really quite bespoke support, and through further funding from the Kellett Fund, we've been able to continue with some elements of that bespoke support, so that we can engage everyone in Elderberries, no matter their level of concern around being out and about at the moment. So that's been really fantastic.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that, Leanne. I mean, it does really sort of bring to life how the funding has been used pre-pandemic and during the pandemic. And obviously, over the last couple of years, been, as you say, a bit of a lifeline for quite a lot of your beneficiaries, but also then bringing such joy to those who benefit from what you do at the garden. So I'd like to just say again, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on this recording, and I'm sure that the donors who left the legacy to set up this fund, they would have loved hearing about all of the stories and Paul, and just seeing what their gift has been able to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, just to add, we're really grateful as a whole organisation for the donors at the Community Foundation. It wouldn't be possible to do these things without it, and as you say, they are a lifesaver to some people. So thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you.